Our next in our trio of markets is going to focus on the trade show and events market. So it's expected that our industry won't really fully recover until large events and big gatherings return. Things like entertainment, education, sports, corporate events, trade shows. Those represent a huge percentage of sales in our industry. And here is shed some light on the very important trade show and events market is Marie Hunter, Senior Director of IEEE Meetings, Conferences, and Events. So Marie, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad you could be here. As I said in that little brief intro, trade shows and events are the things that our audience depends on. So it's going to be interesting to hear your perspective as somebody who plans these events and does so many of them every year. So first, as we get into it, could you give us some background on the type of events and maybe the number of events that your company traditionally operates?
Sure, I'd be happy to. IEEE is the world's largest association for engineers who are involved in electric or electronic engineering. And my role is to oversee the conference business as well as other meetings and events that we do, which is $150 million a year source of revenue for this nonprofit organization. So it's critical to our mission. And we do approximately 2,000 events per year.
Wow.
And one other aspect of the conferences that we do is that they're publishing conferences. So not only is the live event a revenue stream, the publishing pipeline feeds into another revenue stream, which is the largest revenue stream for the Institute. But 2/3 of the content from that revenue stream flow through events. So it's a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, personally, I'm very familiar with your organization, mostly because we're competitors in the Neil Awards competition. So,
Okay.
so that IEEE always wins all the big ones that we want to win as well. So as the pandemic first hit in March, and you realized in-person events and trade shows just really wouldn't be happening, what was your first reaction? Like, what were the first few things you had to do?
Well, actually, I could see it coming a bit before then because we are a global organization and I have
Mm,
about 200 conferences a year in China. So very early on, I could see what was happening in China and I could see that it was spreading. So I think an earlier panelist, Chris, said that he was prepared for something to come. To some degree, I was prepared. I think that each year we do an annual conference for our conference organizers and leadership. And in 2018, our conference was in Berlin and the theme was emergency preparedness. So it's
oh,
something that's core to my everyday practice, although nobody thought that every event would be disrupted. I'm more familiar with your average hurricane or earthquake type
right.
scenario, but I didn't foresee that everything would go south on at the same time. But we could see in January that this was happening, so we had in place a few preparedness practices. One of which is an emergency response team, and I activated that on January 21st. And
Wow.
subsequent to that, I formed a company-wide team across all disciplines because I knew it was a revenue event and I knew that it was bigger than a bread box. So we started. So we immediately, we had some protections because we were prepared. I had excellent insurance in place.
Mm,
And I knew that for the most part, my revenue was protected, which was fantastic. We also
that's
have
great.
a very resented strong force majeure policy that is in place. But I think the 10 years of resentment since I put it in place paid off this year.
I would
So
say
on
it
the
paid off in
expense side,
spades.
we were good too. That
Yep.
allowed us to really look at the community and the people who were impacted, which for us was authors and researchers around the globe. And if we think about what was just said about universities, um, many of our researchers were thrust out of their laboratories and their universities, and their personal timeline for either getting published or graduating, getting their PhD, whatever it was severely disrupted as well. And
Mhm.
our mission was to help them get published. And so we pivoted to digital and we pivoted very quickly. I had a
Wow.
small digital events team in place, certified up to speed on tools, but it was a very small team doing about a dozen events a year. And then they became sort of the epicenter of the company in very short order.
Right. They suddenly moved from the background to center stage, so to speak, didn't they?
Right. And so a lot of my events team were quickly cross-trained and that kind of thing. So we've had, as I said, there's about 2,000 events. About 1,000 of them are what we call financially owned, and then 1,000 of them are just technical consultation and publication. So of the 1,000 that we own, 600 of them have gone virtual. And the rest were either in January, February in places that hadn't been locked down yet. A few in the first week of March managed to go
Right.
through. And then from then it's been virtual, some held in the same time frame that they originally planned, and others pushed to later in the year. 50% of those events are happening fourth quarter. So it's busy.
So are they happening in person?
They're happening virtually.
Oh,
And
okay.
now we're beginning to see in small pockets the emergence now of the hybrid events. So in China, for instance, I have about 25 that are hybrid between now and the end of the year. We do see some very small, I mean, under 20 people happening, where it's safe to do so. But for the most part, it's virtual, and but happening in year for the most part.
When's your next in-person event scheduled domestically? Do you have anything
There
on the
are
calendar?
some in-person events scheduled in, starting in February, but to be candid, they're in full consultation about, they're probably going to need to go virtual. So there's a large one that we think will be okay for June, fingers
Mhm.
crossed.
Gotcha.
But it's in every contract, in every scenario, we're anticipating the pivot to virtual or the pivot to hybrid should that need to be, because it's not just is it safe in the locale that it's occurring, it's can people get into the country,
Of course.
and are there 14-day quarantine boundaries and all of
Right.
this.
Right.
So it's all very tenuous.
Absolutely. So as you've had to make these shifts to virtual, how has that shift changed any of your events marketing strategies? What have you had to do differently as far as trying to get the word out?
Well, we do have a bit of an unusual quote unquote marketing strategy because these events are really driven by the research that's being shared at the conference. So
Mhm.
traditionally, it has very much been a word of mouth, author to author type of approach. And they, even prior to me joining the firm, they didn't quote unquote market the conference itself. There
Right.
has been a history with the trade shows and other larger events that where there's a large exhibitor presence, that's where the giveaways really would come into place in volume. For the others, it might just be something smaller for a smaller number of people. And for those situations, we have provided the exhibitors and sponsors other virtual opportunities. And one of the things we've learned, and that will stay with me, is that we have managed to retain our audience of people that signed up. There have been shifting price points and shifting ways of delivering that, but for the most part, the retention has been pretty good. And in addition, there are many audiences who would not have attended this event that are interested in attending, maybe not at the same price point that an author or a traditional participant would
Right.
pay. But there's a pretty big market for us out there of people that would like to drop in and out. So as we're learning, we're saying, oh, maybe they really would like to hear this keynote, or they would really like to be able to do Q&A with someone who's an expert in this field. But
Hmm.
they were never able to get on a plane and fly to Las Vegas. But if they could, they may pay something to have these kinds of interactions. And I think as we get more skilled in bringing the sponsors and exhibitors in, there are lots of cool new opportunities to put the exhibitors in front of these audiences.
Right.
So exhibit sponsored breakouts. Where promotional products could come in for something like that. I was
Hmm.
speaking to someone a couple of weeks ago. Is the idea, why not sell an exhibitor or a sponsor an opportunity to pre-send an item, and everybody wears their T-shirt on the Zoom call, or everybody wears the hat on the Zoom call, and there's a
Right.
pre-meeting. So it's about, I think someone had said creative services. That's where it's at right now, is
Hmm.
not just the item, but what is that item doing to connect the participant either to the exhibit or to the event?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that there's what all this has done has probably sped up, and we talk about this a lot for many industries, but specifically in the trade show market, has sped up the the need to combine, virtual and in person.
Right.
And you guys must be seeing that and almost thinking and planning, even when we do see the other side of this, that's really what it's going to look like.
It is going to be with us forever. And I think particularly with the customers, volunteers that I work with, there was a reticence around virtual. So as I said, I had a small team that was certified, that was in this space, and it was pulling teeth to make believers out of them.
Right.
And I think we can take away a couple of things. One is they're believers.
Hmm.
Okay. They realize that a lot of this can be done virtually. And so that fear factor has been taken away, although it's a lot more work for them to do things independently virtually than it is for them to, have a chair, have a session chair, walk into a ballroom and stand behind a microphone is a lot easier than having a session chair have to run a bunch of Q&A and tech tools and mute and unmute. They're not that interested in that part of it.
Hmm.
So it's changing the balance of who does what a little bit on these events. But
Right.
also, I think that there's a tremendous hunger to get back together in person. I can't overstate how eager people are to get back together.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's going anywhere. I could describe myself as an event evangelist. I have no fear of virtual. I think it only makes it better and bigger.
So yeah, you know what? That takes me right to an audience question that we got in. It's do you think we will ever see large crowd in-person event gatherings again, or will the numbers be smaller going forward? So I guess really not just will we ever see them again, but more will we see the attendance numbers that we had seen in 2019? Will we reach those again, or will it be this more hybrid approach that will change it?
It'll be both. I think that what I've been saying to my team and even to my partners, like in hotel industry and airline industry, who I'm also speaking with, is 2021 is not the new normal. 2021 is a bridge. We're
Hmm.
still in emergency response. When we're talking about emergency response, it's prepare, respond, recover, and then innovate and thrive.
Mm.
And I think that we're still in between respond and recover. 2021 can be a bridge to the next phase. So, fully recover and then innovate and thrive, put into place the things that we've learned.
Right.
So, yes, I think that, 2021 is not going to look like that. It's not going to be the numbers that we had in 2019. Maybe certain things will shift forever, like maybe there'll be some things about meal service that shift, or there'll be some
Mhm.
things about capacities that shift, to be determined, right? Are some of these health and safety measures that we learned things that we'd want to carry forward with us? But people, in a way, it's created such a hunger for people to get together, a hunger to travel,
Sure.
and a sort of appreciation for how things were, that's just under the surface of just everybody I know who's in the industry.
Right. Of course. Okay. So before I let you go, what would be your one piece of advice that you would give to promotional products companies that are trying to target, um, maybe not just even the trade shows themselves, but the exhibitors at trade shows that are all such big clients within this industry?
Well, I know that there's a challenge with virtual events in terms of an exhibitor buying something and shipping it to someone because the shipping is so expensive. But there might be a way to convert the idea of a promotional product more into the idea of swag. And
Mm.
I think you cross that bridge by having some creative capacity on your team. So you're providing items that people would want to purchase, and maybe they pay the shipping, and the exhibitor or the organizer participate in paying for the item. And you create a triangle that makes it affordable and reach its goal. That's one piece of advice. But if you're to kick that up
Love
to
it.
a higher level, it really is about partnering with your client, understanding what their challenges are, and finding ways to expand what you're offering, which it sounds to me like a lot of folks have done. I loved the idea about a kit for employees.
Mhm.
You could have a kit for your conference organizer volunteers. you could bring in exhibitors and some really pithy copy to create. I think about South by Southwest, which of course we know didn't happen in 2020. But
Right.
when I go to South by Southwest, my first stop is to buy a $30 T-shirt that costs $2 to make, right? So it's my first stop. I can't wait to do it, but I would do that online. And
Sure.
so, how do we triangulate those interests and make it possible? And I think you have to know a lot more about what's happening with your customers' events and their objectives to do that.
Right.
I
Well,
would
that's
also
great advice.
target 2022. Start making advance sales.
Also, yeah, that it is great advice. And as you said, our audience is very creative and flexible, and will take that to heart for sure, because that's how they've approached things for this year, and obviously will for next year as well. Marie, thanks very much for joining us here today and lending your insights
Sure.
on our conference. It's been great.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you.